What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another car review. This is of course the all-new 2020 Hyundai Sonata. Huge thanks to Hyundai for providing me with this awesome opportunity to review the new Sonata for you guys today. So whenever this was revealed at the New York Auto Show earlier in 2019 here, it was a very bold design, and it still is. I mean, compared to all the competitors, this really stands out and looks much more distinct than most of those do. And so it all starts right up front there. So the whole vehicle is 1 inch wider. The whole vehicle is also longer and lower. It's on this all new platform, so the wheelbase is actually 1.4 inches longer. The actual car overall is 1.8 inches longer, and it just got all these cool design traits. For example, the main thing you can see here is this LED daytime running light, and instead of just having the normal headlamps, which are attractive and good on their own, it also extends up into the hood here. That's the first time anyone has ever done that, I think, on a production car, and I just applaud Hyundai for being bold and creative and not just following along and having something that fits in. That is actually a new idea, and I love that. And whenever the lights are off, it just looks like a nice normal chrome piece and nicely blends in with the rest of the hood. The hood also is really distinct because it actually goes all the way down to the grille. Most of the other competitors, you have a line there that cuts off where you have the normal front fascia. It's all blended together. You also have lower fenders than you get in a lot of the other competitors, and that's mostly because they lower the shock towers. You have this very almost exotic look to the front fender, and it's a little bit lower and more sleek. You also have this very cool body line that runs down the side here. Out back, you also have some very distinct taillights. So, you know, it did look similar to some competitors whenever they first came out, but I think now it really has gotten more unique looking to me the more that I look at it. I mean, you have that duckbill kind of spoiler to it there, and I love how the lights wrap around it. Night is really where this vehicle I think is going to stand out the most, both with those rear lights and with these front ones. And other stuff you'll see is little diffusers there on top of the tail light, and so that's a very cool touch as well that actually helps with aerodynamics. And so overall, you know, just both the back end, the front end, everything on this vehicle just looks so distinct and unique, and I really just love Hyundai for taking a chance here with the design, and I think it definitely is going to catch people's eyes on the road. As for the interior here in the 2020 Sonata, well, it's a mixed bag. Some stuff's really impressive, some stuff isn't quite as impressive. So first thing I do have to say though is I do love this interior design. It looks very cool and has some very unique features that I'll highlight here in a minute. But anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have these perforated leather seats that are heated and cooled seats, and I have to say Hyundai does probably some of the best cooled seats in the automotive world, period. I mean, even Mercedes has weaker cooled seats than this. I mean, these seats get nice and cold really quick for both the back and the seat bottom, and that's something that very few companies can still figure out for some reason, and Hyundai is one of the few that actually has good, effective cooled seats. As far as the comfort, I've been in these seats all day and they are super comfortable, no complaints whatsoever there. I just wish there was a little more support. Obviously this is a mid-sized family sedan, so I'm not looking for anything sports car like, but you know, I'd say that the torso support's not bad. It's certainly, you know, very wide for all kinds of body types, but the thigh support is just really wide open, and even most family sedans have a little bit more of a snug feel here for the thigh support. So wish that was a little bit better. Next is the steering wheel here in the Sonata, which is really great. I love this wheel. Has a perfect 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches. I love this metal trim you have here on it, and you know, the little metal rocker switches. You do have some plastic buttons here, but it's actually this new like lighter gray colored plastic, and I think that actually gives a little bit of a higher quality finish than what you see on, you know, normal black plastic buttons. But this metal feels nice and thick and heavy duty. You even have these metal plated paddle shifters here in the back, which are actually cool to the touch. They still sound plasticky, so they're not, you know, metal all the way through, I don't think, but much nicer than most of just the straight up plastic paddle shifters you get in other family sedans. So really an awesome job on the steering wheel here. Next are the gauges here in the Sonata Limited. Now this one has this digital gauge cluster, but this is something you can get as an available option in lower trims as well. And it's a 12.3 inch display, and I really like the way that it looks. Obviously it's identical to what you saw in the Palisade, which is a good thing. So you even have the different drive modes can change the look of it. Mostly it's just between normal and the sport, but the sport really nicely jazzes everything up there and looks a lot cooler. But you know, so there's a good amount of customization there. You can scroll through. I especially like that adaptive cruise control look, you know, is very futuristic. Otherwise you can scroll through all your basic information. Nothing too advanced there. You can add additional things if you'd like. So not a ton of information in there, but I think those gauges are very attractive, and I personally definitely prefer them over the standard analog gauges you you would get in a base model. And another thing here that you get in the Limited is this heads-up display, which is a color heads-up display. It mostly is white, but there are a few other things, like for the blind spot monitoring, it'll be orange, and adaptive cruise will give you some additional information there. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you have this 10.25-inch display here, widescreen in its setup. And again, this is very similar to any of the other stuff you see in like the Palisade, and also some of the newest Kia products have the same thing, since obviously they're owned by the same company. And I love this setup. I love that it's large, but it's nicely divided up into these three little sections here on the home screen. Very easy to navigate through. You know, the navigation maps look pretty good, nothing amazing, but get the job done. You know, I love there's the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration here, of course, as standard in all Sonatas. Now, this 10.25-inch display is on the higher end of the spectrum. So the base model gets an 8-inch screen, but then I think after the base model, the next level up, you can option in this screen. So it's not only reserved for these top trims, but you would normally just get an 8-inch screen. That's something important to note. I will say, though, a couple other little things. So you see these capacitive touch buttons here on the left and on the right, and they're okay. It just means that you have to take a little more focus to make sure your finger's landing on the right thing, since there isn't really much physical separation. You don't really feel anything whenever you're touching those. So a little bit more distracting than having, you know, some type of actual buttons there. I do appreciate you have a volume knob, and it looks nice, and feels pretty nice too. It's pretty solid, but not quite as, it doesn't feel quite as expensive as it looks, but still nice nonetheless. But unfortunately, we don't have a tune knob, which is really a bummer, especially since the only tune buttons you have here on the screen are, you know, you have them on the radio portion, but then if you want to go over here, you see the Seek thing, but it's all capacitive touch again. And so that takes so much more concentration and is so much more distracting than just having a knob you can grab onto and spin. Now, you know, I believe you can still tune here with the left little rocker here on the steering wheel, and you'll have your favorites plugged in whenever you're owning one of these. Once you have all your presets in there, it shouldn't be a big deal, but just an interesting thing to note. Coming down, so you have these air vents, which I usually don't talk about air vents, but these ones have this nice little bit of a metal finish to them here, and have some damping to them. They feel a little heavier than your average plastic air vent, and so they're not Mercedes quality or anything, but you know, certainly a nice improvement. I also really like this climate control area. I think it's a nice fresh design. I like the little display within the knobs. I think it's a very efficient use of space, and really like the way that's all laid out. Just a few buttons, nice and simple. But in this area is where you start to see the mixed bag. So, you know, for the materials here in the Sonata, it is, you know, again, this is the Limited, the top nicest trim. And so the top of the dashboard, you can see it starts out with this nice stitching and some nice padding, feels very good. You have this nice little strip of metal here to separate it. And then even this plastic here has a little bit of a soft texture to it, a little bit of padding. That's fine, all good. But then you go beneath these vents, and then this is rock hard plastic. And guess what? That's where you're resting your knee all the time. And I was actually passenger in this vehicle for a couple of hours too, and resting my knee on there for a couple hours actually hurt my knee. Like, it's rock hard, and that's the part where it needed to be padded. No one's, you know, hugging the airbag, no one's hugging the glove box area. So having padding there, while it's nice, no one touches that. But the part that everyone's touching is the knee area, and that's rock hard. So that's really my main complaint here. Also, the tops of the doors have a little bit of padding to them, but kind of look cheap to me, honestly. But I really do appreciate some of the other aspects of the door here. So you have more stitching. You have, they thought that it was actually easier to have this whole thing be a grab handle. So that's a cool thing. And you also have padding that goes all the way up this door panel here. So you'll have, you know, around the window switches and stuff, you have a little bit of plastic, but the padding does still continue on, which is nice. But otherwise, I mean, like this large grab handle, in addition to being easier to grab onto from any position, that also can double as a storage space there. And moving on to storage space, in addition to that, you also have your normal pocket in the door with a bottle holder, which is great to see. Coming over to the center here, you have a nice deep cubby, which has in the Limiteds here, and it's actually in some of the lower trims, you can even get a wireless charging pad, which is what you'll see here. That's important because that's also where you're going to rest your digital key if you use that feature, which I'll get to in a minute whenever I talk about the key. But anyway, a nice large space here, nicely rubberized. You also will see a power outlet, 2 USB jacks, and then again, that wireless charging pad there. So great to have all that. You also have the shifter buttons here in this area. Now, this is the first Sonata or any sedan from Hyundai that has shift by wire. So there isn't any physical shift mechanism, but that nicely allowed them to free up this area to have more storage. But so, you know, this is something you saw from the Palisade, and it's now trickling down to other models. A few other buttons here for drive mode and camera mode. That's another thing you can do with this screen is you have the surround view monitor here, which is great, which means, you know, you have a forward camera, of course the backup camera, and all the surrounding cameras as well. And so it gives you great view here, and that's really nice when you're parking in tight spots. Otherwise though, you have these 2 cup holders with a little slot in the middle to stand up a phone if you'd like. You also have the center armrest, which does have some padding on it and feels pretty premium. And you open that up, and then you'll see a nice rectangular, deep cubby there. No additional hookups or anything in there, but that's okay since you have all of them out in the open. No complaints there. And so a good amount of space in there as well. And so storage space, I'd say it's right in line with the rest, a little bit better than some of the others in this class. And so overall, a pretty good job there. Backseat space in the Sonata is also a very good job. So actually, as far as the numbers go, the backseat space, the vehicle did get longer. And so me being 5'9", sitting behind myself, I have easily about 6 inches of legroom to spare. A very, very spacious back seat. And so this is now right in line with the best in the segment. Like the Accord also has a very large back seat like this. I think this is actually more space than what you're going to get in a Camry or Mazda 6 for sure. Better than Fusion, better than Malibu, I think, as well. I mean, like I said, top of the class as far as rear seat space. And although they actually did lower the roof, so you have about 0.2 inches less of headroom. So, I mean, a microscopic amount less. But again, I still have plenty of headroom being 5'9". So even though you have a slightly more coupé shape, it doesn't really hurt rear headroom, which is great. Other things to note, so you have those same grab handles in the doors, which can double as a little pocket, as well as a bottle holder in the bottom of the doors. You also see a fold down center armrest with 2 cup holders built into it. You'll see rear air vents, which is standard on all except the base model. So that's great when you look forward. And you also see a single USB jack there. It'd be nice to have 2, but only 1 there for that, but not, nice to have nonetheless. And so overall, very comfortable and spacious back seat. Trunk space is also very nice and spacious here in the Sonata. So interesting thing to note, if you want to open the trunk, there is an external release. It's just, you just press the metal there in between the Hyundai logo, and that does open it. There's a little button there, even though it doesn't look like there is. That's how you open it, which is very important, because even me, I was fumbling around, and if I wasn't told where that was at, I would never have guessed that or found it in a million years. So that's how you get into your trunk if you're wondering. But once you're in there, it's a nice, very wide, very long space. Again, I'd say towards the top of the class, if not the best in class. I mean, a huge trunk here, and like I said, a good amount of depth and stuff. Beneath the floor, you'll also see a spare tire, which is great to see, and something that isn't always a given these days. So nice that they included that as well. And so overall, a really good amount of space here in the trunk of the Sonata. All right, so start them, go for a drive. So the standard Hyundai key here is really nice for this new Sonata. Really nice design. It's brand new. Has some nice metal on it that's cool to the touch. And several buttons there on the back, because this actually has this functionality here in the higher trims that have the parking sensors and everything, that you can actually, it's got a digital key functionality. So first off, with this key, you can actually move the car in and out of a parking spot, and it'll do minor steering adjustments, but it's basically just supposed to go forwards and backwards. It can only go up to 30 feet at the most. So basically it's just for pulling in and out of tight spaces, where you can autonomously drive your thing, just very, very briefly. You have to be within 10 feet of the vehicle as well, so you're within eyesight of it, and that's how you control that. But you literally just like hit the lock button, hold to start the engine, and then you just control it like a remote controlled car, which is kind of crazy, but awesome to have that. But then there's also the digital key functionality. So basically it uses the NFC from your phone along with the near field Bluetooth, and so there's a couple of different ways you can do it. The NFC right now is only available on Android. Eventually that's going to come for iOS as well, but for as of right now, only Android phones that works, where you can use your phone as the key in the car, and then to actually use it as a key, you put it in the wireless charging area, because that's where the NFC sensor is. You put your phone in there, and then that will start the car. You don't even need the key. And so that's awesome. And that digital key does also work with Hyundai's app, so that with the Blue Link and everything, you can actually send someone else temporary or permanent keys. So, if you're somewhere else and you need to, someone's at your house and they need to have access to your vehicle, you can give them only access to like the trunk or to the interior or full driving privileges. And you can customize all kinds of other stuff in the app. But that's really handy, and so great to have that digital key, so you don't have to worry about having a key on you if you don't want, even though this is a very nice key, and I wouldn't mind having this in my pocket. It's not too big or anything. But if you wanted to be even more streamlined, and you don't even want to worry about a phone or something, or if you're an iOS user that has an iPhone, they also have these key cards. And if you are familiar with Tesla, you will know that they have something very, very similar. And so it's basically just like a hotel room key kind of card. You'd also have to, have it in the wireless charging area. So you're going to have this key card out in order to use it, but you can use this as well and still have a digital key if you are an iPhone user, and that does the same thing as the phone connectivity does. And so that's awesome. And with the digital key, they also tie it to all your driver settings. So, you know, in the past, you could kind of sometimes tie a key fob to all your settings and stuff, but with the digital key, you can assign it to yourself. So you can have it so that it'll preset, you know, your seating position, your climate controls, your radio presets will be your radio presets, and you can differentiate between that and the other keys and the household and stuff. All your settings are saved whenever you have your key all set up. And so that is a very cool customization, and so great that they're, you know, having that. And that's actually the first application of an NFC digital key like this in a non-luxury brand. But anyway, once we got all the keys out of the way, if you want to still use the standard one or whatever one you want to use, just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button here, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 Hyundai Sonata. So, first thing you notice, well, you have a pretty nice high seating position here, although the whole vehicle is a little bit lower, the roof's a tiny bit lower, so you have a sportier look from the outside here. On the inside, you still have excellent visibility, so you have a pretty nice large windshield, you have a pretty thin A-pillar. I like this little window you have right by the mirror there, really opens up this side view very, very well. And view out of the back is also great, even though you have a little bit more of a rake to the rear window than you used to. But just pulling out onto a main road here, you notice right off the bat this 8-speed automatic is very responsive, and this one has the 1.6 liter turbocharged engine, so you have lots of torque. You actually get full torque at 1500 RPMs in this engine, so it really starts very early on, and so around town and stuff it's going to give you a nice strong pull, and then also in the higher RPMs, you know, that turbo and that torque will continue on. It doesn't drop off immediately, so you have good mid-range as well. But you know, even at some lower speeds here, you know, doing about 45 miles an hour, it's pretty refined. It's really such a smooth ride. That's one thing that really stands out. And we don't have any corners that are too intense around here, but you know, some of these sweeping corners, one thing, you know, you have nicely weighted steering. Even in the normal mode here, it's pretty hefty, which is pretty nice if you're an enthusiast. If you're someone who wants lighter steering, this is one of the heavier ones as far as the competitors go, but I personally like that. I think it gives you just a little bit more of a stable feel. It helps the car to feel a little less darty, and so if that's something that you're looking for, I think you'll like this. But so you're running 235 wide Michelin Primacy all-season tires here, and so 235 is a pretty good width, so you should have pretty good grip. But again, I don't really have too many opportunities to test out the grip or anything here, but it gives it a very stable ride just rolling down the road. But let's do an acceleration here, see how it does. So it pulls pretty good. We're running a 1.6 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine here in the Limited. The SCL Plus also gets this engine, and so it does 180 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque, and so this is currently the fastest motor you can get here for the Sonata. And so comparing it to the higher engine options vehicles you get from some of the competitors, it is down on power, obviously, but they will be fixing that soon with an N-Line version, which will kind of up the ante on the horsepower to make it competitive with all those top engine offerings from the others. But so, you know, acceleration is okay. Motor Trend got an 8.2 seconds 0 to 60, which is a little bit slower than some of the base engines in the other competing vehicles as well. But, you know, it's not too heavy. These actually, even fully loaded, are like at 3,336 pounds for a Max Limited. And if you go for the lower trims, you can get that weight even closer to 3,100 pounds. So it's not too much weight to lug around. You're running it all through a normal 8-speed automatic transmission, thankfully, as well. There isn't any CVT here. So even if you go for the lower engine model, you're still going to be getting an 8-speed automatic, which is something I'm very much appreciating here, because, you know, the CVTs and the competitors, they do still feel a little slushy at times, whereas this, you know, nice crisp shifts and, you know, very natural feeling and how you would expect a car to shift if you're, you know, a traditionalist. And so we also do have manual shiftability here. There isn't any dedicated manual mode, but we do have paddle shifters here in the Limited, so we can drop that down and play with that a little bit here. Pretty responsive. And do the upshifts. So upshifts are a little bit on the lazy side. But again, for a family sedan like this, it's right in line with what you get from all the competitors, really. None of them are any faster or any slower. They're all kind of about this. So, I mean, honestly, you know, in sport mode here, it does figure itself out very well. So you're better off just leaving it in drive, putting your foot down, and it'll react, you know, even faster than if you're playing with the paddles. But it's nice to have the paddles if you do want to, you know, play around or feel a little sporty. But yeah, I mean, power-wise, it is, you know, plenty of power for your normal daily driving stuff, and, you know, passing power and everything is plentiful, especially here with the turbo engine. The base engine you can get here is actually an all-new 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, and that's direct and port injection. This turbo one is only direct injection, but the base motor there, you have both injections, and so that actually, interesting enough, does about 11 more horsepower, 191, but you're down on torque a little bit. So the higher trims here get more torque, the lower trims get a little bit more horsepower. So just kind of, there's not a huge difference as far as numbers go, but as far as feel goes, there are going to be, you know, some significant differences there. Fuel economy is also pretty close between the engines, with the turbo one just sacrificing about 1 mpg in each metric, although on the highway you do get about 2 less than when you get in that base naturally aspirated motor. So these are rated at 27 in the city, 36 on the highway, and 31 combined for the 1.6T here. And so like I said, you'll get 1 mpg bump for city and combined, and then highway is 2 mpg higher for that naturally aspirated motor. So, you know, very impressive fuel economy here, especially, you know, for the turbo one to be getting those high numbers. And again, a lot of that is thanks to the lower weight. You also have very good aerodynamics here to go along with the beautiful looks of the new Sonata. So drag coefficient is very good, and it makes for a vehicle that really slips through the wind very well. You know, the fact the vehicle's a little bit lower now, it's got a little bit of a wider stance, all that really helps to give you a stable feel on the road at some higher highway speeds like we're at now, but you do also have the great aerodynamics. Also, one interesting thing to note here is on the higher trims of the Sonata now, it actually has laminated side front glass, as well as, of course, the laminated windshield, and so that kind of makes it a little quieter in here and makes it very competitive with everything else in this segment as far as interior noise goes. And you know, I will say it's not luxury car quiet or anything, but laminated glass really does a big difference in making things quieter on the inside here. And so, you know, just cruising on these open desert roads here, it's a very you know, relaxed and pretty quiet and serene experience. You can also, if you do want to tone out the little bit of wind noise and road noise that you do get, you have this Bose 12-speaker stereo here in these higher trims, and that actually is available even in some of the lower trims as an option too. And that's great because you know, in the past they've had Infinity speakers, and you know, it hasn't been quite as high of a branded stereo thing. And this is also at least 2 more speakers than when you get in all the competitors. It's actually 3 more than when you get in I think Camry. And so you have more speakers. It's you know, a nice crisp sounding system here with the Bose. It also has the Centerpoint technology, so you can change. It also will intelligently adapt to the exterior sound conditions and custom tailor the sound mapping to give you a better sound here on the inside, depending on what the conditions are outside, which is all very clever technology. And so it all just, you know, makes for a very refined experience. All right, so I've been driving the Sonata here for a while longer. We're out on the highway now, and so one thing that I forgot to mention about this engine is for this 1.6 liter turbo, it has Hyundai's new technology, is continuously variable valve duration, and so basically it can kind of shorten or lengthen the camshaft positioning to have increased efficiency and performance. And it's something, this is the first time it's ever been used in any gasoline vehicle anywhere, I think. And so I will say that I can't notice anything different. It drives completely normal. There's nothing unusual about the engine, so it's something that, you know, you might hear about it and then forget all about it, but it is working in the background, helping to, you know, get better performance and efficiency. But it's nothing that you'll notice, I think, from the driver's seat. At least I haven't noticed. A couple other things, though, that I have noticed from the driver's seat. Main thing is the adaptive cruise control system. So Hyundai does a really good job of giving you a bunch of great standard safety equipment. So you have adaptive cruise control as standard, which does full speed, so it will come to a stop and everything. So it'll do the inching up in traffic and all that kind of stuff. It also has standard lane keeping assist, which is great. And so I've been testing out those 2 systems, and the adaptive cruise works well. You know, it does wait a little bit longer than some of the other systems to brake, and so it's a little less smooth than some of the others, which seem to anticipate things a little bit sooner, even with the shortest following distance like I have this one on. So that's one thing. But the main thing, though, is the lane keeping assist. Now, there's other companies where it's a little more active, and this one seems a little more relaxed, which some people might appreciate, but I will say that either as a new driver or if you're around other traffic, it is a little concerning at times because, we're on these very windy mountain roads here in Arizona, and so this isn't a typical highway, which is usually straight as an arrow or very mild corners. But on tighter corners, it will actually really get close to the line, and if it's too tight of a corner, there's actually one time where it just went over the line, and so. And there's also times earlier where the sun was shining right on the road, and it wasn't horrible visibility. I could still see the road lines okay, but the car couldn't, and so the little illumination here went away, saying that it couldn't provide the steering assist. So it got confused, and like I said, it was just a little, there's other systems, for example, Honda Sensing. I was on a very windy highway whenever I used to test that system out. And that one, even around tight corners, it'll get aggressive and really steer well and not get close to the lines and stuff. This system, it does veer a little too much. And like I said, actually just flat out failed to stay in the lanes at one point. So definitely on the lower end of the rankings as far as the lane keeping assist goes. That's something that definitely needs improving. But if you are on a mostly straight road, it's going to be doing a perfectly fine job, and it does relieve you from a lot of the attention of having to make minor steering corrections, because the car can constantly be doing that for you. Again, whenever you're on the normal type of highways. But if you're on something windy like this, definitely pay attention if you have the system on, because it's not guaranteed to always keep you in your lane. But the other safety stuff, this has a lot of really cool stuff you can't get in some of the competitors. For example, this has blind spot monitoring is still an option. You have to go up, but I believe it's only on the second level up. So although it's not standard, it is something that is still very affordable, and so that's good. And they actually did the packaging really well on this, which I'll mention more in a minute. But so the blind spot monitors is also something really nice that they first introduced in the Hyundai Palisade, and now we have it here in the Sonata. And so that'll actually have cameras in the mirrors there, and so whenever you put a turn signal on, you'll see whatever you can see from that mirror there, so you don't have to look over your shoulder. It's displayed right there in whatever side of the gauge cluster, obviously for what side of the vehicle you're looking at. And so that's a very cool thing that no one else offers, and that's something that is really good. And I like that they have that in addition to still having the indicators in the mirrors for people who still do actually check their mirrors and don't just rely on this technology. So everything else, they did a very good job on all the safety tech here. There's all various other systems, automatic reverse braking you can get, and several other things. So there's a whole laundry list of stuff, and they all have different acronyms depending on the manufacturer and stuff. So I'll list all those on screen there to see everything that is available. But they do a great job with that. One thing, I listened to the Bose system a little bit more, but I've really only been listening to satellite radio, which is such a low bandwidth sound source that it's not really a great judge of sound quality. But like I mentioned earlier, you do have more speakers than the competitors. That's not always a guarantee. So that's it might still not be as good as those systems, but I'm going to have to have one of these for a week to really test some higher quality sound sources and things like that. But Bose systems, I'm really impressed with them in other manufacturers usually, so I still have pretty high hopes for this one. But getting back to the packaging though, that is one thing. For example, if you want that Bose stereo, or if you want the blind spot monitoring, they have some packages. So they've kind of simplified the pricing strategy. So the base model, there's no packages or options. So if you want a base model, you're getting the base model and that's it. And then same goes if you go for the limited. The limited gives you everything. There isn't any additional packages to add on to a limited. So either end of the spectrum, if you're on one extreme or the other, you're going to get everything or nothing, and most people seem to like that in the people that are shopping for those types of vehicles. Now for the mid-grades, you can get, for the SEL and the SEL Plus, you have a couple option packages which you can get, and they are reasonably priced, and so you don't have to jump up to a limited, for example, if you want the Bose stereo, or even a heated steering wheel, which even some of the other premium brands really gouge you on price in order to get a heated steering wheel, if they even make it available at all. And for this, you can actually get it on an SEL as part of an option package. So again, you don't have to be spending 30 grand to get a heated steering wheel, which is really nice that they've brought some of that stuff down to the lower packages if you're willing to pay a little bit extra for it. And I think at that point, it is certainly worth the extra money for something like that if you live in a cold place. Speaking of pricing though, that is one other thing I want to mention here. So the pricing on these is very competitive. So they start around $24,300 here for the base price, including destination, that is. And then if you go all the way up to a fully loaded limited, they can get as high as a little over $34,000. So about a $10,000 spread there. And you know, there's a lot of good standard equipment, and there's, you know, a lot of nice features up here at the limited version as well, like we're driving. It just depends on, again, what you're looking for. But I think as far as competitors go, you know, they did price this very competitively, and it does undercut basically everything. And so overall, I think this does stack up very well to the competition. You know, one last thing I'll mention as far as handling goes for anyone who's curious, I'm not going to do a full comparison here, but I will say that driving-wise, I would say this actually feels kind of similar to the Ford Fusion as far as its feel. You're sitting up a little bit higher than some of the others. Like the Honda Accord has a lower sitting position, feels sportier and a little smaller. This feels a little bigger. I think it feels closer to the size of a Toyota Camry as far as just your driving position and how it feels from behind the wheel. And I'd say handling is closer to Camry. I think the Accord is still best in class handling, so this doesn't fight for that top spot, but I think it does you know, still handle very well. I also think as far as, like, we're going over some rougher road now, you hear some elevated road noise, and a lot of the others do a better job of isolating that. I'll say this is probably pretty close to Camry, but Mazda 6 is quieter in here. I think Accord is actually a little bit quieter as well, and so I'd say it's mid-pack as far as a lot of that goes. But, you know, as far as, I think a lot of people are going to want, you know, comfort above all else, and they're going to want something that feels substantial. A lot of people, they like having something where you're sitting up a little bit higher, and the Accord might seat you a little too low. And so this kind of, I think, does a nice blend of, you know, many characteristics of the competitors. And I think this is definitely more oriented towards those who want the softer luxury setup. Obviously, like I said earlier, the N-Line is going to be the one for those who want something sporty. So definitely wait for that here in the fall of 2020. One last thing, though, I do want to mention about the competitors is that as far as all-wheel drives, that was something that another journalist brought up in the Q&A session is, you know, is Hyundai going to be offering all-wheel drive here for the Sonata? Because, you know, Toyota just recently announced that they have all-wheel drive. It's going to be available as an option in 2020. The Accord doesn't, but, you know, you can get it on, obviously, the Subaru Legacy, and now you can get it on the Nissan Altima as well. And Hyundai said that they're not doing all-wheel drive, and they said part of that was because, you know, they wanted to give it this lower positioning, and so to have, you know, this lower body, it's kind of a little bit tougher to package. They also said even on front-wheel drive models, you would have to make accommodations for that all-wheel drive setup, and that's something that would drive up the cost. And so in order to keep this at its very competitive price point, they wanted to eliminate that extra complexity of building in the availability for an all-wheel drive. So they didn't bother with that, and so it's just front-wheel drive. But that's something I can totally understand, and I think most people that buy these mid-size sedans still do buy a front-wheel drive version. So I don't think that's a huge missed opportunity, but that would be something that'd be interesting to see if they can add down the road, possibly with electrification, like, you know, Toyota's been doing. That would be something that'd be interesting to see. But in the meantime, though, the Sonata here, I'm very impressed with it. Again, I don't think it's best in class in any metric, but I do appreciate that it's bold styling, which is something that's kind of missing here in this segment, and you know, bold interior styling. I really love, you know, the fact you can get this massive 10-inch screen is something you don't get in any of the competitors aside from the Subaru Legacy, the brand new one with its massive vertical screen. That's the only one that gives us a run for the money. Otherwise, you know, tech, I'd say this is probably tops as far as that goes. But, you know, as far as driving and stuff like that, it's definitely on the softer side, so definitely give one a test drive, see if that's what, you know, you personally are into. But yeah, so anyway, huge thanks to Hyundai for providing me with the Sonata here and this awesome opportunity in Arizona to review it. Let me know your thoughts on the new Sonata in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.